Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is Hall Squires. This is my research project for PER 611, and I'm going to be talking about barriers to youth participation in sport. What prompted this research? Um, Prior to my time here at Delta State, I spent the 3 previous years teaching middle school, teaching seventh and eighth grade social studies, and I also spent a huge majority of my life heavily involved with physical activity, with sports. I think that this question of what barriers still exist in keeping youth participation from sport is one that's highly relevant to my experience and just deeply personal to me. I think when we talk about why youth do participate in sport, I think it's monumentally important, right, to their development. When you talk about not just physical health benefits, but the socio-emotional benefits of participating in sports are extremely widespread. Um, you know, um, a lot of my introduction talks about the social skills that are acquired through sports, the emotional regulation skills that are acquired through sports. Really, I think that when we talk about youth development and understanding how to interact with other people, how to develop regulation skills, how to develop um, cooperation and being really a part of a community and working with other people. I think youth sports do a fantastic job of helping young children, acquire those skills to allow them to be productive members of society as they move into adulthood. And so that's really what prompted this research. And, also just if, I do go into academia, into academia after Delta State, I think this is a highly relevant question that could contain a lot of information that could be highly important, to understanding what barriers might still exist as, I re-surround myself with youth sport. Okay. To kind of get into the research, you're going to see that I really took a two-pronged approach, um, listing two main areas of concern as barriers, with the first one probably being no surprise to anybody, being financial demands. Financial demands are obviously going to be a massive limiting factor. I really looked at first, Hyde et al. Hyde and his colleagues did a study examining the way that financial restrictions um, pose a limiting factor to youth participation, and it was confirmed that as income went up, the likelihood that the youth in that household participated in sport went up exponentially. And so this is some data that I had gathered from the Project Play initiative. That's an initiative, a part of the Aspen Institute. That's a pretty well-known institute that focuses on youth sports. And so what you see is they actually broke this down into household income as a percentage of the poverty level. So what you see here in this first group, excuse me, is 0 to 99. That's 0 to 99% of the poverty level. So that means that they are below poverty. And as you can see, this percentage is reflected by that, right? Those that are under the poverty level see youths participate in sport not even 40% of the time, not even two-fifths of those kids are participating in youth sports. Once you get to poverty level, or even double the poverty level, almost at 199% of the poverty level, you still see not even half, right? That's roughly 44% of youths in those households are participating in sport. It takes from 200 to 399% of the poverty level for you to see above half of those youths participating in sport at about 55%. And then once you get to 400% or more of the poverty level, you see that roughly 72% of those youths are participating in sport. Obviously, a pretty huge number. Also, from the Project Play initiative below here, I have some data that kind of backs up why that's the case. Um, which is rising costs, right? So not only are youth sports expensive, they're becoming increasingly expensive. And so I thought this was a really profound data. And so that's kind of why I threw this table together, because just in 5 years, right, from 2019 to 2024, we see that these sports, baseball, soccer, basketball, increase their costs in a massive way, right? Just to kind of give you some numbers here, this change in baseball and soccer is roughly, to calculate the percentage for you, a 58% increase. That's just in 5 years, right? From $660 the family is spending on average to play baseball goes up literally 58% from $660 a year to $1,100 a year. Soccer, you see a similar percentage. Basketball is the lowest of the three, but you're still seeing nearly a 50% increase. That's a 48% increase from the average money spent being 427 all the way to $876. Um, so, um, what does this mean moving forward? Well, the research that I also looked at was a study done to kind of address financial demands being a limiting factor. And it was really, really a fascinating study by two researchers, Burke and McGurven. And they essentially wanted to test how effective a fee waiver would be. And so what they did was they found a city of a population of around $60,000 or $60,000, excuse me, 60,000 people. And with this population of 60,000 people, there was some pretty significant income inequality, as you would expect. And what they did was they just provided a fee waiver to anybody who requested it. All they did was add on the registration form a box that you could check that said either I request a full waiver to not pay, or I request a partial waiver and only want to pay $20. And it was, kind of headlined above that said, like, we don't want this to be for this program to create any sort of financial hardship. So if you would like to request a fee waiver, check the box down below. And so how was it effective? Well, it was highly effective in that I will say this study was published in 2016, but the data was a little bit older than that. I guess it took some years to compile all the data and put forward the study. But this was conducted in 2009. In the year before, in 2008, this same city's sports programs had 14 youths with a full waiver. When they instituted this program and practice the study or put the study into practice, there was 174 full waivers. So highly effective in recruiting people or recruiting youths to participate in these sport programs. And critics might say, well, people that don't really need the fee waiver are just going to take advantage of it. But that's not what the data suggested. While Title I school students occupied about 22% of the sports program, which was a significant increase from the previous year, um, the number of those 174 full fee waivers were over 50%. It was 52% of those 174 full fee waivers were by students of Title I schools. And so, what does that mean? Well, that shows that if you provide access to a fee waiver, if you remove the financial demands as a limiting factor, then you can include low income families, right? And so what we see is the financial demand when it's eliminated, and you are very intentional um, about creating this inclusive policy of we want everybody to be able to participate in this youth sport program, then people will take advantage of it. And you can recruit, a holistic group of youths from a variety of socioeconomic backgrounds and create an environment that's really inclusive and really reflective of the full community. Okay. That wraps up financial demands. My other limiting factor that I talked about in this research project is gender inequality. And so I've got a little bit of data here. This one within this subset of gender inequality. I really have two things I want to talk about here. Just to kind of give you an idea, this first chart that I made in the top right corner here about the gender of coaches is just because I found it kind of mind-boggling. Right? Women actually do slightly outnumber men in this country. The most recent census data has women consisting of 50.5% of the population, with men right around 49.5. With that being said, in this national study of youth sport, the gender of coaches was about 25% women, 75% male. Now, yes, that is kind of a shocking number. There is a lot more context missing from that, but you can see that when you dive deeper into the data, that it's still, at the end of the day, women are disproportionately represented in positions of leadership, in this case as coaches. We see that young girls make up about 35% of the population of youth sport programs, with young boys representing about 65%. And so when you consider that 35% of these girls, or 35% of the youth are girls in these sports programs, that 25% number still shows that they're underrepresented. Now, what does that mean? Um, I want to kind of build on that just a little bit, coming down to this chart at the bottom right corner here at gender discrimination in coaching, and kind of understanding that a big reason why we see this small number, at least that's what the researchers have attributed much of this to, is, this long-standing patriarchy, long-standing gender norms. And so I think this particular question did an excellent job demonstrating that. So the question, this was a survey. This research study was by et al. Goodness. Um, and they surveyed over 420 coaches from 24 different countries. And so one of the key questions that they asked them was, did they feel obligated at one point or another to demonstrate their coaching abilities to a person of another gender? Shockingly, you see women having female coaches having reported that 70% of them felt that they were at one point or another obligated to demonstrate their coaching abilities to a man. Meanwhile, 65% of men did not feel obligated to demonstrate their abilities to a female coach at one point or another. And I think, again, right, this is trying to demonstrate and affirm this reality that, in fact, gender inequality is still very much prevalent. These patriarchal values, in which men dominate leadership positions, in which women struggle um, to develop the same level of trust and belief that men have garnered. It's still there. It's still an issue. It's still one that must be addressed through more widespread education, and through more constant surveying, like we see in this study, to understand um, why this is happening and to address it head on. The other element of gender inequality that I looked at in the research was really centered around educational resources regarding female biology. And so what we see is that the researchers attribute a lot of lower participation in youth sport for young girls relating to female biology, and specifically like menstrual cycle, and the lack of education of coaches around this. And so to kind of demonstrate this, I put this chart together, in which coaches were asked whether they thought that these three topics of the menstrual cycle, hormonal contraception, and pregnancy were sufficiently addressed in coaching education programs. And we see that it was very clearly agreed upon by both male coaches and female coaches that these educational resources are far insufficient, are extremely inadequate. And that was reflected in the data on both male and the female side. There's additional data that I included in the paper that talked about how we see gender norms and patriarchal values live on through men's inability to converse with their female athletes surrounding the menstrual cycle, regarding it as a woman's issue. Specifically, it was cited in the research as such. And so, really, when we talk about gender inequality as a limiting factor, there's really two areas of concern that the research wants to address, which is one, there needs to be far more put a far better push to encourage, promote, and maintain women in leadership positions. And then there needs to be far more educational resources distributed to coaches of both genders to be able to talk about female biology in a way that makes youth sport feel like a safe space. And so that as young female athletes are going through these changes, they have a coach that's able to support them. Um, how is this going to benefit my career? Just to kind of wrap this up, again, this kind of comes back to what I talked about in the beginning. I think youth sports absolutely paramount. It's huge for the development of young children. And as somebody who's spent a lot of time in youth education, I'm a big believer in the power of sport to develop highly positive socio-emotional skills and also physical health skills that can last a lifetime. Um, yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you very much.